Hey guys, in this video we are going to be making a crochet button-up crop top. To do this you can use any weight yarn with the recommended hook size that you would like. I am using about 230 yards of a number 4 medium weight yarn with the recommended hook size of 5.5 millimeters. To get started with this, you are going to want to know the circumference around your midsection where you would like the bottom of your crop top to sit, and you are also going to want to know the measurement around the bust. We are going to be increasing from the measurement around the midsection, increasing to the measurement around the bust, and for me that is 27 inches, and then I will be increasing up to 35 inches around. Again, to get started with this, we are going to be working 3 different panels, 1 back panel and then 2 front panels for this crop top. And we are going to start with the back panel. So you are going to want to start with half of the measurement that was around the midsection that you chose to use. So again, half of that measurement, which for me is about 13.5 inches, and you are going to want to chain a chain that length, which is again half of the length around the midsection measurement, which turned out to be about 55 stitches for me. So we will be starting out with this chain, and if you need to see how to do this or anything else in this video, there will be links for those videos in the description box below. If you like this video and channel, please give this a like and subscribe and leave me a comment to tell me what you think. Also in the description box you can find the link to my Etsy, and there you can find the written pattern for this pattern, as well as other art that I make and sell, such as macrame pieces, jewelry, t-shirts, and more. So please check that out if you'd like. And lastly, if you'd like to keep up with what I am up to outside of videos, you can follow me on Instagram at @thecraftnut. And you can also tag me there with the things that you make from my patterns, because I'd love to see your work too. When you have the length for your beginning chain that you would like, again for me 55 stitches, this will count for our first row. So we are now going to go on to work the second row for our back panel. And to do this we are going to chain 1 more, which does not count as a stitch. And then we are going to single crochet into the second stitch from the hook. So again, single crochet into that stitch, and then we are going to single crochet into the next stitch and into each stitch across this beginning chain. When you've made it to the end of this second row, which is the first row of single crochets all the way across, you should have the same amount of single crochets as you chose to use for that beginning chain, which again for me was 55 stitches. And again, that was the end of row 2. For row 3, we are going to turn our work. We are going to chain 1, which does not count as a stitch, and we are going to work 1 single crochet in the same first stitch. We are going to go on to work 1 single crochet in the next stitch and into each stitch all the way across this row. When you've made it all the way across that row, the third row, you should again still have the same amount of stitches that you decided to use for the second row and for your beginning chain. And again, that was the end of row 3. At this point, we are now going to go on to repeat row 3 until you have the width for your back panel that you would like. You will want to make the width of your back panel to be wide enough to go from where you wanted the bottom of your top to sit around your midsection, and you'll want it to be wide enough to go up to underneath your arm, where technically your armhole would be starting. So again, you will want your back panel to be wide enough to go up underneath your arm and leave yourself just enough space for your arm to be comfortable with this sitting underneath it. And I am going to work my back panel to be 21 rows wide. Because we are going to be increasing from the circumference around our midsection to the circumference around our bust area, you are going to want to increase the width of this back panel across from one side to the other as you go up. In some sections, if you have a big increase from the midsection to your bust. You can also choose to do a lot of this increasing on the front panels if you would like, which is what I am going to do. I only increase one time on this back panel, but if you would like to do more of the increasing on your back panel instead of your front panels, then that is fine too. We are now going to go on to work row 3 until you have the width for your back panel that you would like, measuring from where you would like the bottom of your crop top to sit around your midsection up to about where your armhole would start underneath your arm. Because we are going to have to increase from the circumference around your midsection to the circumference around your bust, you are going to want to increase either on this back panel or on your front panels. What I mean by that is you are going to want to increase the amount of stitches that you are using for your rows. So again, I used 55 stitches across my back panel, and I'm going to increase on the 7th row of my back panel up to 57 stitches. That is the only increase that I am going to do on this back panel, and I'm going to leave most of the increasing for my front panels. It is up to you where you do your increasing. You can even it out in between your front and back panels if you want. You can leave all of the increasing for your front panels, or you can do all of the increasing on your back panel. It is up to you and where you would like that to be. I will be doing all of my increasing on the back panel on both sides of the panel on either end. But on the front panels, I will only be increasing on one side of the panel. Therefore, I can make all of the increasing seams sewn together, and the buttons in the middle of the crop top on the front will be straight up and down. Now, we are going to go on to work our back panel to be the width that we need it to be. I'm going to go on to work 1 single crochet in every stitch in every row until row 7, where I'm going to increase, and I will show you how I do that in just a moment. Okay, I have now worked through row 6, and on row 7 I'm going to increase on either end of this row. So to do this, I'm going to start with a chain of 1, which does not count as a stitch, and I'm going to work 2 single crochets into this same first stitch. So this is my increase at the beginning of this row with 2 single crochets in the same first stitch, and then I'm going to work 1 single crochet in the next stitch and in each stitch until I have 1 stitch left at the end of this row. And when I have 1 stitch left, I am again going to work 2 single crochets into this same stitch, and I have now increased at the beginning and end of this row, and I have increased by 2 stitches. So I went from 55 stitches to 57 stitches. Again, how and where you increase is all up to you. So if you would like to increase on more rows than just 1, then you can. And if you need to increase by more than just 1 stitch on either end of the row, then of course you can do that as well. But this is the only time that I am increasing on this back panel. So I am now going to go on to work one single crochet in each stitch on every row until I have finished row 21, and then I'm going to finish off my back panel, and we will go on to work the front panels. Okay, so I have now finished off my back panel, and again I went on to work 21 rows. The only row that I increased on was row 7 with 2 single crochets in the first and last stitch of that row. Otherwise, I worked 1 single crochet in each stitch on each row for 21 rows, and then I finished off the back panel, and we will now go on to work the front panels. When you are ready to work the front panels, you will want to chain however many you need to go halfway around the front of you, or half the amount of the width across the bottom of the back panel, plus a few stitches for overlapping space for a button and buttonholes. Whichever way of measuring is more accurate to make the amount of space past the middle for the button and buttonholes that you would like is the amount of stitches that you are going to want to use. You will want to keep in mind the size of your buttons. If your button is small, you will most likely be able to use 1 stitch space for the buttonhole. And if you have a little larger button, you may need 2 stitches for the buttonhole. I am using 27 stitches, which is just halfway across, and leaves me enough space to have my button in the middle, plus 1 stitch after. That way I don't have too much space after the button. And we will be working a border all the way around, so that will add to the amount of space after the button as well. So again, I am working my chain for the front panel to be just long enough to have my button right in the middle with 1 stitch after the button and the buttonhole. For this first front panel, we are just going to be focusing on making it the shape that we want it, and this will be the panel that we put the buttons on. But again, for now, with this first front panel, we are going to work on the shape that we want, which is fairly easy. And again, you are going to want to increase just a little bit on your front panel at some points so that you can increase to the measurement that you need around your bust area. Again, depending on how you decided to divvy out the increasing between the front and back panels, you will have to compensate for what you didn't increase on the back panel now on this front panel. I did not increase very much on my back panel, so I will be doing most of my increasing on my front panels. You will want to make sure you remember exactly how you work this first front panel. That way you can do the second one the same way. So now with this front panel, I am now going to work the second row the same way as we did for the back panel. I'm going to want to keep these 27 stitches. So I'm going to chain 1 more, which does not count as a stitch, and then single crochet into the second stitch from the hook. And then I'm going to single crochet into the next stitch and each stitch across this first row. When you have made it all the way across that second row, you should have the same amount of stitches that you decided to use for your beginning chain. And again, for me, that is 27 stitches at this point. Now, just like with the back panel, we are going to go on to work 1 single crochet in each stitch for each row until we need to start increasing for our bust measurement. I am going to wait until I am finished with row 6 to increase on row 7 on the front panel, just like I did on the back panel, because that is where I need to start increasing. You do not have to start increasing on the same row on the front panel as you did on the back panel. Again, it is up to you where you increase and how you increase. Again, like I said when we were doing the back panel, I am only going to increase on one side of this front panel. That way the increasing incline is toward the seam, and where my button is going to be, it is going to be straight. Therefore, my buttons will go straight up and down. So I will explain how I am going to do that, but I am going to go on to work row 3, 4, 5, and 6 with 1 single crochet in each stitch for each row, again until I'm finished with row 6, and I will show you how I'm going to increase. Okay, so I have now worked through row 6, and I am now going to go on to work row 7 and increase in this first stitch. So I'm going to start with the chain 1, which does not count as a stitch, and I'm going to work 2 single crochets into the same first stitch. And I'm only going to increase with this 1 stitch on this row. You can choose to increase in the next stitch as well, or as many stitches and on as many rows as you need to. But again, I am only going to increase with 1 stitch at the beginning of this row. And then I'm going to go on to work 1 single crochet in the next stitch and into each stitch until I get to the end of this row. So I made it to the end with 1 single crochet in every stitch after the initial increase in the first stitch, and that was the end of row 7. And for me, at the end of row 7, I went from 27 stitches to 28 stitches. For row 8, I am going to work 1 single crochet in the first stitch and in each stitch all the way across, because I am not going to increase for row 8. But if you were going to increase on row 8 and you wanted to keep the one side straight, like I want to for my buttons, then you would want to work 1 single crochet in the same first stitch and 1 single crochet into each stitch until you have 1 stitch left, and then you would want to work 2 single crochets into the last stitch of the row. Therefore, your increases would be on the same side of your front panel. And of course, if you need to increase in more than 1 stitch, you will leave however many stitches you need to increase in at the end of the row for you to do so. Again, for row 8, I am going to work 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way across this row. Okay, I finished with row 8 with 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way across. And for row 9, I am going to increase by 1 stitch again. And I am now on the same side, starting on the same side as I did when we increased the first time. So I am again going to increase in this very first stitch of this row, again to keep my increases on the same side. And I'm just going to work 2 single crochets in this same first stitch, and then work 1 single crochet in the next stitch and in each stitch across, just like I did for row 7. Also, if you would like to or you need to, you can increase throughout the rows to spread out your increases so that they're not all bunched up at the end of the row. But it is also up to you and the look that you are trying to achieve. Okay, I am now at the end of row 9, and again I increased in the first stitch and then worked 1 single crochet in each stitch after that. And now I went from 28 stitches to 29 stitches at the end of this row. Now that you see how I am increasing on just one side and how to do this, you are now going to want to go on to work your front panel to be the size that you need it to be to increase to your bust measurement, going from the mid-section measurement up to the bust measurement. And you will want to do this in the amount of space that it took you to work the back panel. What I mean by that is, for instance, I worked 21 rows for my back panel. So for your front panel, you are going to want to get to your bust measurement by the time your front panel is the same amount of rows that your back panel is. Reason being is because, like I said, when the back panel was being made, the top of your back panel is going to be where your armhole is. Therefore, that is going to be the widest point around your top. So you are going to want that to be your bust measurement, because that is the widest point of the top and the widest measurement that we need. So again, you are going to want to go on to work your front panel now to be the same amount of rows as your back panel, making sure that you are increasing enough to make it fit around your bust measurement and your midsection measurement. I'm going to put here on the screen how exactly I worked the first 21 rows of my front panel. But basically, it's a combination of going back and forth between increasing rows and non-increasing rows, which again, you can see here on the screen. And then I worked a couple of rows with just one single crochet in each stitch in every row for a couple of rows, and then increased again, and then worked one single crochet in each stitch again for a couple of rows until I got the same width for my front panel as I did for my back panel. Once you have your front panel the same amount of rows as your back panel, and you have it the measurement that you need around your bust, we will then go on to work the top triangle area, which finishes off covering the bust area and then goes into the strap for the top. It is okay if the top of your front panel is wider than you would like the triangle part at the top of the front panel to be when you begin the triangle part. Mine is also going to be wider than I want it to be, and we will cut the front panel off just a little bit to work the triangle. At least for mine, I will. You can, of course, work yours however you want, but I will show you how we do that. And again, I will not work my top triangle part to be as wide as the 21 rows that matches up with my back panel. I have now worked the first 21 rows of my front panel, again to match up with my back panel. And here you can see that one side is straight all the way up, and then this side is curved so that it will increase to the measurement that I need around my bust measurement. And again, this increasing side is the side that will be connected to my back panel. Because this area is going to be directly underneath our arm, you may not want your top triangle part to go all the way over to this seam. You may want to cut it off a little bit early. That way the triangle isn't cutting into your armpit, which is what I am going to do. I do not want my top triangle to go all the way into this seam. I'm going to cut it off a little bit early, and I will show you guys how I am going to do that, making it so that it is cutting off on the side that is increased on and the side that is going to connect to our back panel, again so it decreases next to our armhole. As for the straight side, I'm going to keep it straight for just a few more rows, and then I will start decreasing on both sides to further make that triangle on the top of the front panel. So for the next row of my front panel, row 22, I'm going to start with one single crochet in the same first stitch, because again I want this to continue being straight for a few more rows. So I'm going to work one single crochet in the same first stitch, And then I'm going to work 1 single crochet in the next 25 stitches, which is not all the way across the top of this front panel. I worked the top of my front panel at the end of my 21 rows to be 32 stitches across. So again, this will leave me a few stitches at the end of this row. Okay, so far now for row 22, I've worked the first single crochet in the first stitch, and then 1 single crochet in the next 25 stitches. And now I am going to bring the next 2 stitches together in 1 2 single crochet together. So I'm going to insert my hook into the first stitch and pull up a loop, and then insert my hook into the next stitch and pull up a loop, and I'm going to yarn over and pull through all of the loops on my hook, making 1 2 single crochet together. And this is going to be the end of row 22 for me. Therefore, I am left with 4 stitches that are not being used at the end of this row. And again, I decrease right here by 1 stitch. Therefore, this will start angling up for this triangle area. For row 23, I'm going to turn my work, and this is the side that will be connected to the back panel, and this is my straight side where my buttons will be. And now this is where my top triangle is going to be worked off of, and I would like to decrease on this side again, but I'm going to keep this straight for 1 more row. So I am again going to bring 2 stitches together on this side to again continue bringing this up and in. So I'm going to chain 1 and start with my 1 2 single crochet together. So I'm going to pull up a loop in my first stitch and pull up a loop in my second stitch and bring those 2 stitches together and 1 2 single crochet together. And then I'm going to work 1 single crochet in the next stitch and 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way across the rest of this row. So I have now finished with row 23, and after row 21 I decreased from 32 stitches down to 27 stitches. I used 28 of the stitches so that it looked like this, but I made it only 27 stitches by bringing those last 2 stitches together in 1 2 single crochet together. To do this, I again decreased on this same side, which is again the side that I have been increasing and decreasing on the whole time, therefore keeping this side with the buttons straight for just 2 more rows. And also wanted to mention that, of course, if you needed to decrease more or less than this, you can of course do so. So you can decrease by more than 1 stitch at the beginning or end of the row if you need to. You can decrease on either end starting whenever you want to, and you can also not decrease on every row if you do not want to. I now, for row 24, am going to start decreasing on both sides of the row. Therefore, the triangle will start going up on both sides of the front panel. I'm going to continue only decreasing by 1 stitch at the beginning and end of each row, but again, you can do more or less than that if you need to. I'm also not going to decrease on every row, but I am going to show you how I am decreasing, and then I will go through how I worked each row with you. So for row 24, I am going to decrease on both ends. So I'm going to start with a chain 1, which does not count as a stitch, and I'm going to bring the first 2 stitches together in 1 2 single crochet together. So I'm going to bring up a loop in this first stitch and bring up a loop in the second stitch, and then bring them together. And then I'm going to work 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way across this row until I have 2 stitches left at the end of the row. Okay, I now have 2 stitches at the end of that row, and I am again going to bring them together. So I'm going to pull up a loop in both stitches, and then yarn over and pull those 2 stitches together, and 1 2 single crochet together. And now at the end of row 24, I went from 26 stitches down to 24 stitches. For the next row, row 25, I am not going to decrease at all. I would like to prolong the width that this is at for just 1 row. So I am going to work 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way across this row to keep the width at 24 stitches. You do not have to do this if you do not want to. You can decrease again if you want or need to at this point, or if you would like to prolong it at any point, you can do the same thing by working 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way across. Again, at the end of row 25, I still have 24 stitches, and for row 26, I am again going to decrease at the beginning and end of this row, just like I did for row 24. So I am going to bring the first 2 stitches together and 1 2 single crochet together after chaining 1, which does not count as a stitch, and again pull up a loop in the first stitch and the second stitch and bring those first 2 stitches together. And then I'm going to work 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way across this row until I have 2 stitches at the end of the row. When I have 2 stitches left at the end of this row, I am going to bring them together and 1 2 single crochet together. And I now went from 24 stitches to 22 stitches at the end of row 26. Now that you have seen how I decrease on one side to make the armhole area and not on the other to continue the buttonhole straight side, and you've also seen how I decrease on both sides to make the triangle go on both sides of this top part, you can now go on to decrease and work each row for this top triangle area the way that you would like it to be made. So you will now want to go on to cover the rest of the breast area in the way that you would like it to be covered, making your triangle the shape that you would like it to be. We will be working our strap off the top of this triangle area, so you will want to work this top triangle to end off where you would like the top of this strap to start. What I mean by that is you can, of course, direct the way that this triangle is going by where you decrease. So that is why I'm decreasing on both sides evenly. Therefore, it goes straight up. But if you were to decrease on one side more than the other, it would make it go one way or the other. So again, you will want to decrease, making it so your triangle goes up to where you would like your strap to start. And you are also going to want to work it down to a good amount of stitches for the width of the strap. My strap I made to be 5 stitches wide. So this wide, my strap is all the way across. So therefore I'm going to work this triangle down to 5 stitches. And again, we are going to be working a border around both sides of the strap. So I kept that in mind when deciding how many stitches I was going to use for the width of my strap. Again, we are going to have an extra stitch on both sides. So even though my strap is only 5 stitches wide, it is about actually 7 stitches wide with the border at the end. I am going to be decreasing evenly on either side up until row 39, which I will be ending at 6 stitches at that point. And I'm going to put here on the screen how I worked the rows from row 26 to row 39. So you can see exactly how I did that. But I basically used a combination of these last 2 rows where I worked 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way across the row to prolong the width. And then I worked 1 row with a decrease on either side of the row, and I alternated between those 2 rows for a few rows, and then I decreased for a few rows in a row, and then I worked it down to 6 stitches again by row 38 and 39. So I am now finished with row 39, and I have 6 stitches across the top of my work here, and you can of course see how it is now a triangular shape, and this is the side that I want to connect to my back panel still. So again, I am now going to work mine down to 5 stitches because that is the amount of stitches I would like to use for my strap. So now for row 40, I am going to turn my work, and because I am not decreasing on both sides, it will make the strap go one way or the other depending on which side I decrease on. I would like my strap to go more towards the outside. Therefore, I am going to decrease on this side, making it lean towards the outside and towards the side that I have increased and decreased on. If I wanted the strap to go in towards my neck, I would decrease on the opposite side of this row. But I'm going to decrease on this side, so again, chain 1, which does not count as a stitch, and bring the first 2 stitches together in 1 2 single crochet together, and then work 1 single crochet in the last 5 stitches or 4 stitches of this row. So I now have 5 stitches for row 40. When you have your work down to the amount of stitches that you would like to use for your strap, you will then go on to work 1 single crochet in each stitch for each row until you have the length for your strap off the top of this triangle that you would like. I went on to work mine through row 100, making my strap about 16.5 inches from here at the top of the triangle to the end of the strap where I sewed it on to the back panel. The strap length on these tops may be a little different than what we are used to in the way that we usually make straps on my patterns, because the back panel does not go that far up your back. Therefore, the strap will need to be longer to be long enough to reach the back panel. So again, my strap is about 16.5 inches from here at the top of the triangle to the back panel where it connects to the strap. So again, this is how it will be connected, and it is about 16.5 inches going all the way up to the back panel. So again, I'm going to work 1 single crochet in each stitch for each of those rows. This will be row 41. So I'm going to chain 1, which does not count as a stitch, and work a single crochet in the same first stitch, and work 1 single crochet in each stitch across. And I'm going to go on to do this until I have finished with row 100, and then I will finish this first front panel off, and then we will go on to work the second front panel with the buttonholes. Okay, so I have now worked my strap to be the 100 rows that I want it to be. And again, that is 100 rows starting from the very first row, working all the way up my front panel, and then all the way up this strap. And then I finished it off and left a tail long enough so that I can sew this strap to the back panel when I am ready. Now before we go on to work the second front panel, we are going to look at this first front panel. And again, this side that is curved is the side that I'm going to be sewing to my back panel. And this side that is straight is the side that I'm going to be putting my buttons on. So at this point, I'm going to decide what rows I want my buttons to be on. And you're going to want to do the same thing. Again, just placing your buttons wherever you would like them to be. And I am actually going to work mine to be 4 rows apart. The first one is going to be on the 4th row, the second on the 8th, the third on the 12th, the 4th on the 16th, the 5th on the 20th, and the 6th on the 23rd. So the first and last one are 3 rows apart, and then the middle ones are 4 rows apart. But when it is all finished, it does look even, and it holds it where I need to hold it. The 23rd row for me is also the row that I did decrease on this side where the armhole is, but it is the last row that I worked to be straight on this side that is straight for the buttons. So I stuck a button on that row to keep that part as straight as possible. So again, now at this point with your solid front panel, you're going to want to decide where you want your buttons to sit, and then we will make the second front panel with the buttonholes on the rows that you decide to have your buttons on. So I am starting with 27 chains, just like I did for the first one. And for the first front panel, I did not start increasing until row 7. So I went on to work 1 single crochet in each stitch for each row until row 7. But again, on this second front panel, we are working buttonholes, and I would like my first buttonhole to be on row 4. So I'm going to go on to work 1 single crochet in each stitch for each row, just like I did for the first front panel, until I'm ready to work row 4, and I will show you guys how I worked the buttonhole. And you guys will want to go on to do the same thing to start off your second front panel the same way you started off your first front panel, and working it the same way that you worked your first front panel up until the row that you would like your first buttonhole on. I have now worked row 2 and 3, and for row 4 I am ready to work my first buttonhole. So I am going to want to make sure to make my buttonhole on the right side of this front panel, meaning I want my buttonhole to be on the side that I made straight and not the side that I'm going to be increasing on and the side that will be connected to the back panel. I want them all to be on the side that is going to be straight. Because I am not increasing it, I cannot tell which side that is going to be necessarily. So to do that, we are going to grab our first front panel, and we're going to look at this. And the first row, of course, starts here where the tail is, and it goes this way. The second row, we worked starting from this side, going this way. The third row started on this side, and we went this way, which means on the fourth row, I will be starting on the straight side. So I need to work my buttonhole towards this side of the front panel. So again, the fourth row for me is starting on the straight side of my front panel. And as I stated before, I am only using 1 stitch after my buttonhole. And I'm also only using 1 stitch for the buttonhole. So to do this, I'm going to start with the chain of 1, and I'm going to work 1 single crochet into this same first stitch, and this will be my 1 stitch after the buttonhole. And then I'm going to chain 1, skip a stitch, and single crochet into the next stitch. And that is my buttonhole. It may not look like much now, but it does work for a buttonhole. And also, if you wanted 2 stitches after the buttonhole, before the edge, you of course would just work this first single crochet and then a second single crochet and then work your buttonhole and then single crochet into the next stitch. And also, if you have a bigger button and needed 2 spaces for the buttonhole, you will just chain 2, skip 2 stitches, and then single crochet into the next stitch. Again, now that I have worked my buttonhole, I'm going to continue working 1 single crochet into each stitch for the rest of this row. And again, I did not increase until row 7, so I am going to continue working this until row 7, where I increase. And I'm going to do that the exact same way that I did on the first panel. Also, if you are starting on the side that you are increasing on, you will want to work the first part of your row the exact same way as you did on the first front panel, and then work all the way until the end of the row, where you will want to work your buttonhole, whether that be just 1 space or 2 for the buttonhole, and also leaving 1 stitch or 2 after the buttonhole for the space afterwards. Now that I have worked my buttonhole and I am not increasing on this row, I'm just going to go on to work 1 single crochet in each stitch for the rest of this row. And you too will want to do whatever you need to do for this row, whether that be increasing or not, and working your buttonhole on the side that you began on or the side that you are ending on. After you've finished off the row that you worked your first buttonhole on, we are then going to go on to work the next row, of course, and we are going to want to work right over that buttonhole with 1 single crochet or 2 if it's a 2-hold buttonhole or 2 space buttonhole. So I'm going to start with a chain 1, and I'm going to single crochet into the same first stitch, and I'm going to work this row the exact same way as I did on the first front panel. So I did not increase on this row or anything. It was 1 single crochet in each stitch all the way across. So that is what I'm going to do again until I come to that chain 1 space. And if your chain 1 space is there at the beginning of the row, then of course you will do the same thing wherever your chain space is. And again, work the rest of the row the same way as you did on the first panel. I am now at the chain 1 space for my buttonhole, and all we are going to do is work a single crochet right around that chain 1 space. So again, that is all you are going to want to do, whether your chain 1 space is at the end of the row or at the beginning. And if you used 2 stitches for your buttonhole, you will work 2 single crochets over that chain 2 space. And then you will just finish off with 1 single crochet in the next stitch, or again, finish off your row however you need to finish off that row. So I am going to continue working this second front panel the same way that I worked the first front panel, increasing where I need to increase and working the rest of the rows the way that they need to be worked until my next buttonhole row, and the next row that I decided to put one of my buttons on. Therefore, you can see how to do the buttonhole just one more time, and then we will go on to work the rest of the second front panel the same way that we worked the first. Okay, so I went on to work row 6 and 7, and for my next row, row 8, I would like to make another buttonhole. Also on row 7 was the first row that I increased on, so I have my 2 single crochets in the same stitch at the beginning of that last row, row 7. And again, I am now going to go on to work another buttonhole. So now that I have an increase and my first buttonhole, I can easily see which side I need to work the buttonhole on, which is again this side that I am starting on. You too will want to make sure that you are working your buttonholes on the same side. And now that we are working this second buttonhole, you'll want to make sure that you are working the same amount of stitches before the buttonhole and using the same amount of stitches for the buttonhole itself. So again, I'm going to chain 1 and single crochet into the same first stitch, and this is the only stitch before my buttonhole. So I will now chain 1, skip a stitch, and then single crochet into the next stitch. And again, on this row, row 8, I am not increasing, so I'm going to go on to work 1 single crochet in each stitch for the rest of the row. And you will want to go on to work the rest of this row however you worked this row for your first front panel. And again, you'll want to work your buttonhole on whichever side of the front panel that you needed to work it on to make sure that all of your buttonholes are on the same side. So I just went on to work until the end of that row, like I said, and that was row 8 for me, which has the first 2 buttonholes for my second front panel. So you now know how to work the buttonholes themselves and the row after the buttonhole with working a single crochet for each chain space over the chain space for the next row. So you will now want to go on to work the rest of your second front panel the same way that you worked your first front panel, making sure to get your buttonholes on the rows that you decided to put your buttons on, and making sure that all of your buttonholes are on the same side of your front panel. And I'm going to go on to work my second front panel with my buttonholes on row 4, row 8, row 12, 16, 20, and 23. Otherwise, I am going to work this one the exact same way as I worked the first. And then we will go on to sew our top together and sew our buttons on, and then work a border around our top. When you have finished working your second front panel with your buttonholes, and you have your strap the same length as you had your first front panel strap, we will now go on to sew all of these together. If you've already connected your buttons to your first front panel, you'll want to make sure that the side that your buttons are on is facing your back panel when you sew the front panel on. That way the seam will be on the inside, but your buttons will be on the outside. And if you haven't sewn your buttons on yet, like I haven't, you can sew your front panels on however you want, with them on whichever side you would like them to be on. That personally is how I like to do it, sewing all of the panels together first and then sewing the buttons on, but again, you can do that in whatever order you would like. Okay, so to sew these together, we are of course going to take a needle and some of our yarn, and we are going to choose a side to start on. I did not leave my ends long enough to use to sew them together, so I'm using another string. But of course, if you left your ends long enough to use them to sew, you can use those. But again, I did not, so I'm going to start with my needle in these first 2 stitches on both panels. And then I'm going to tie this together. Okay, so I have that tied together, and I'm going to go through these 2 stitches one more time just to make sure that this is done well. And I'm going to hold both of these tails down while I do so they are held underneath this. Just like that. That way I don't have to weave them in later. And now we are going to go on to whip stitch these together all the way up the side until you get to the top of your back panel. So we are going to go into the next 2 stitches on the front panel and the back panel. Actually, it's the other way around, the back panel and the front panel, but the one that's in front now and the back one. So we are going to go into the next 2 stitches from the front to the back and pull that through, making sure, sorry about that, to keep this on top. And that is what we are going to do again all the way until the top of the back panel. So go through the next 2 stitches on both panels and keep that on top. And again, we are going to do this all the way up. making sure to keep your rows lined up as you go. When you make it all the way to the top of sewing these first 2 panels together, you will then just want to knot this off, and then we will weave in our ends and weave in any other ends that are still sticking out. And then you are going to want to go on to do this exact same thing, the exact same way for the second side. So again, you will want to just take your second front panel, make sure to line it up the way that it needs to be lined up, and then go on to whip stitch these rows together the exact same way we just did this first one. Your panels sewn together, you will want to keep your work inside out, therefore you don't lose track of your seams, and all of your seams are on the inside when you are finished. And at this point you are going to want to determine exactly where you want your straps to sit. So again, here are the top of my straps, and I would like my straps to go kind of towards the middle in the back. That way they do not fall off the shoulders as easily. So I would like mine to sit in just a little bit like this. You can make it so it goes perfectly straight like this. You can make it go out, although you want to leave enough space for your armhole, or you can go in like I am. It is up to you and how you want your straps to sit and look. Again, I wanted my straps to go in just a little bit, and you also want to make sure that you have the same amount of stitches in between your strap and the front triangle on both sides. It doesn't necessarily matter the amount of stitches between them, of course, but you will want to make sure that you have the same amount, again, in between the strap and the front triangle. So I have marked mine out already, and I made mine 21 stitches away from the front triangle. So this is sat in the 21st stitch on both sides. And then I am going to start sewing my strap onto the next 5 stitches, because my strap is 5 stitches wide, and I'm going to do that on both sides, and that leaves me with 12 stitches in between the inside of my straps. Yours may be different amounts of stitches, of course, because you may have a different number across the top or a different amount of stitches for your strap, but it does not necessarily matter. Again, you will just want to make sure that you make your strap a comfortable amount of space away from the front triangle. Therefore, it works for your shoulder and leaves you enough room for your arm. And you'll want to make sure that you leave the same amount of stitches in between the front triangle and your strap on both sides. When you have determined where exactly you would like your straps to be, we will then go on to sew them on. And again, I left the string at the end of my straps long enough to use to sew them on. So I have a needle on the end of this first one here. And you will want to make sure, again, that your work is still inside out. And you will want to make it so that the front of your strap, so again, it is inside out now, which means the bottom of it is the front of it, and the bottom of this back panel is the front of our back panel as well. So the outside of our work. We're going to want to make sure that the outside of our work is matching up. So you'll want to fold them both up like this, and then start sewing your strap onto the stitch that you want to start your strap on. So again, we are going to sew this the same way that we did the sides and sewing the panels together. So we are going to start with our needle in the first stitch on the back panel and the first stitch on the strap, going from our front to the back and pulling that through. And again, I am going to go through these first 2 stitches again just to make sure that that is done well. And then we are going to go to the next 2 stitches from the front to the back, making sure this loop gets on top and pulling that through. And we are going to do that for as many stitches as we have for our strap until you have your strap all the way sewn on to your back panel. And for me, that is just these 5 stitches. So here I am at the end already, and again I'm going to go through these 2 stitches twice, and then I'm going to finish this off. by tying a knot and weaving in the ends. And you are going to want to do the same thing, and then we are going to go on to do the exact same thing to our second strap, making sure that it's the same amount of stitches away from our front triangle, making sure that our strap is inside out, and then facing the front of the strap and the front of the back panel together, making sure it's lined up exactly where you want it to be, and then sewing these two together the exact same way. When you have all of your panels sewn together, I am now going to go on to sew my buttons on. So again, I wanted my buttons on row 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and 23, just like my buttonholes here. And I have my buttonholes in 1 stitch from the end. So I'm going to do the same thing with my buttons, making them 1 stitch in from the end of the rows. So again, I am going to take this first button to row 4. So this is row 2, 3, and 4. And I'm going to work it around this second stitch in from the end. So the way I'm going to do this is insert my hook around this stitch from the inside, and I'm going to leave a tail on the inside like this. Then I'm going to take my button, I'm going to stick it through what will be the top right hole, so that it is at the top right of this stitch, just like this, just like we are in this stitch right now. You can pull it from the back or however to get that right. Then I'm going to go down to the bottom left corner, and I'm going to make sure that I go to the bottom left corner of the stitch to make sure that it is right around that stitch the way that I want it to be. And again, pull those both to straighten it back out. And now I can see the stitch I'm working around from the back. So I'm going to go up to this top one and just do my X stitch now for my button. And go down to the bottom. Go to the bottom of that stitch and then pull that through. And I'm going to go over this one more time, and then I will tie this off in the back using both of these ends so that it is nice and secure around that stitch. And then I will weave in both of these ends when I am finished tying them off. And then I'm going to go on to do the exact same thing for all of my buttons on all of the rows that I want buttons on. When you have all of your buttons sewn on, the last thing we are going to do for this is work a border all the way around the outside and around both armholes. So to do this, we are going to start with a slip knot on our hook, and we are going to be working on the outside of our work. We're going to start somewhere on the bottom of the back. So as you can see, I just flip my work so that I'm looking at the outside of the bottom on the back. And with our slip knot, we are just going to slip stitch onto any stitch on the bottom back of our work. And we are going to start with the chain 1, which does not count as a stitch. And we are going to work a single crochet around that same first stitch, and then work 1 single crochet into each stitch all the way across the side of this until you come to the first corner. When you come to this first corner stitch, we are going to work 3 single crochets all into this same corner stitch, and that is to turn this corner. That way we can start working single crochets into the side of every row all the way up this side, and we are going to go all the way up onto the strap, continuing working 1 single crochet in every row all the way up and down the inside of the strap until you come to where you are connected to the back panel, where you will continue working 1 single crochet in each stitch across the top of the back panel until you again come to the next strap, where you will work 1 single crochet into the side of this next strap all the way down the strap, down the side of the second front panel, all the way to the second corner, where you will again work 3 single crochets all into this corner stitch, and then you will continue working 1 single crochet into each stitch all the way across the bottom back of your work, again until you come all the way back to this beginning single crochet for this border round that we worked. When you've made it all the way around that border round and you have finally come back to this beginning single crochet of the border round, we are simply going to slip stitch into the top of the beginning single crochet of the round to finish off this border round. So again, slip stitch into that stitch, and then we are going to finish this off and weave in all of our ends for this border round. And then you are going to want to go on to do this same thing for your 2 armholes. So you are again going to want to start with a slip knot on your hook, and you are going to want to start on the back of your armhole area here, slip stitching into any stitch. Then you will want to start with a chain 1, which does not count as a stitch, and single crochet into the same first stitch that you started in, and then work 1 single crochet into each stitch until you come to the strap, where you will work 1 single crochet into the side of each row all the way across the strap until you come to the top triangle area, where you will continue working 1 single crochet in each of those stitches all the way down until you again come to this flat area for the armhole, and you will continue working 1 single crochet in each of these stitches until you again get back to the beginning single crochet that you started for this armhole round, and you will slip stitch into it just like we did for the first border round and finish off your ends. And then you will want to go on and do the exact same thing for the second armhole.
And that's all there is to it. So I hope that that was helpful and enjoyable for you. If it was, please hit that sub, like, and bell button and leave me a comment to tell me what you think. I hope that you guys go on to create many more amazing things. And until next time, guys, I'll see ya.